Shaun Donovan. Shaun has been Commissioner of New York City's Housing and Preservation Department, Housing and Urban Development Secretary in the Obama administration, and then later for President Obama, Budget Director. Shaun, welcome. And you've put together an interesting set of policies around transportation. I don't know if you want to dive in right there. The other thing I would maybe start off with, though, is you and I spoke, I don't know, it was a while ago, like in the spring, when traffic was really low at the sort of bad first part of the pandemic. And you mentioned you were riding around in your neighborhood and adjacent places, and who knows, I don't know where else in the city, but what was that like? How do you see the city from the saddle of your bicycle?
John, I will say, as a lifelong New Yorker, I have been seeing the city from my saddle, and a lifelong biker, seeing the city from my saddle for many, many years. I actually bear the broken bones and the scars of doing that, and have a pretty unique perspective. I learned to ride a bike in the streets of the city. I spent my career working in communities that have been too often left behind. And I think you will certainly agree that this is unique among the candidates. If you see over my right shoulder is a portrait of John Lewis, who I met 30 years ago this year in 1991, when some friends and I approached him with the crazy idea of retracing the route of the Freedom Rides on bicycles. And convinced John Lewis to ride the first mile with us in Washington, D.C. It began a lifelong friendship with him. And I think I'm pretty sure no other candidate in this race has cycled 1,000 miles retracing the route of the Freedom Rides with John Lewis and others. And I would also say, very personally, not only my direct experience having cycled my whole life in the city, but also having led for President Obama creating the Sustainable Communities Initiative, where we really partnered with the Department of Transportation, the EPA, to reimagine what our cities look like, to make them more sustainable, to really dramatically change the transportation options that are available. I believe this is an issue that I've been a leader on, not just from the saddle, but also from the public sector, in a way that really makes me unique in this race. So I really look forward to talking about the policies, how we really make this vision that you had and so many others have into a reality under the next mayor.
So we have a little bit of a Rorschach test here behind me, which are, they're fairly recent protected bike lanes, but they're not really protected bike lanes.
Protected bike lanes.
Protected bike lanes. Protected, unprotected bike lanes. So, why don't we dive in? You just talked about breaking down silos at the federal level. What do you think we need to do to overcome this problem with protected bike lanes that are still full of cars and trucks?
Look, part of this is very directly enforcement and making sure that we're doing a better job. I think there's a place for more camera enforcement. That would be a significant piece. Frankly, I think getting more cops and others onto bicycles themselves, both to do enforcement, but to sort of live the experience in a more direct way, would be important as well. But I also think, to your point, we need a much more coordinated effort across the federal government. I've led that on cycling and transportation, but I've also led it on homelessness. I created the strategy that dramatically reduced homelessness in President Obama's administration. And the way we did that was by bringing every agency to the table. And so I think we need to take vision zero to the next level. I also am proposing that we create an office of the public realm. It isn't just cycling and our bike lanes that are a challenge. It is so much about our public realm that is not coordinated across agencies. And I think having real leadership from City Hall on this issue will be critically important.
So sort of give us a scenario. What does that look like? So you're, in the Donovan administration starts in January, and so sometime in the spring we're setting up these things. And so what is your mandate to the people you assemble, and who are some of those people?
I hope we will come back and talk about how we reimagine our streets more broadly too, because I think that would be a critical piece of this. as well.
No, I
But
mean, we're certainly open to hearing about open streets and, the rest. And there are lots of the city where you don't have a lot of room for a linear bike lane, but a low traffic area would suffice to make it safe, as it did, in the early parts of the pandemic. We had so many new people riding because it just wasn't that scary anymore.
right, right. And look, since you mentioned it, I want to focus for a moment on this. I think the fundamental problem is we're a 21st century city with 20th century streets. And we really do need a much broader effort, not just on cycling, to reimagine the infrastructure on our streets. I would also, again, venture a guess that I'm the only candidate for mayor who's actually been to Curitiba, Brazil, and sat with the mayor there talking about the most advanced bus rapid transit system in the world. And part of my vision is that we need to really reimagine streets for greater mobility across the board. And if we did that with true bus rapid transit, that would give us the opportunity to create real protected critical passageways through so many parts of this city, particularly those that have been left behind in bike infrastructure and city bike, and as well in the infrastructure. And I think part of this, we have 1,200 miles of bike lanes and just over a third are protected, but we haven't done a good job of really ensuring we have the ability to protect significant size and really protect them and also interconnect them. And so a big part of the effort needs to be not just on more lanes and more protected lanes, but on an overall plan for interconnectedness and ensuring that we're creating real thoroughfares for bicycles in many more places. And I think there are real opportunities in the same way that, we re-envisioned the High Line. We have underutilized freight lines in the city. We have many places that could become our bike highways. And again, I've seen this in other countries. I've traveled and worked broadly with other mayors around the world. And there's a lot we can learn from other places around the world about how to create truly 21st century streets and a really interconnected, protected set of bikeways.
Yeah, I mean, I love to hear that because it seems like we're not learning right now.
Right.
The places that I like to watch, because they've come to cycling late, like New York, they're not Copenhagen, they're not Amsterdam, are London and Paris. And what I'm seeing there is they're building stuff with concrete and steel and stone, where we're painting and putting up plastic sticks. And they're doing it fairly quickly. Like when we rebuild a street, it really takes a long time. And they're putting in this infrastructure within a few years. And so I want to know how they're doing it. And I want to know why we can't do that. And I want to figure out what the New York application of those things is. So you see like a more infrastructural, physically present set of these things in our future?
Absolutely. And look, I think part of the problem, honestly, and we've seen this in Paris is a very good example. This is a moment when if we'd had the plan ready, it would have been the perfect opportunity when New Yorkers are reimagining our streets, as you said, when we had less traffic, where we could have dramatically sped up the implementation. President Obama used to say to us all the time, never let a crisis go to waste. And this was a moment where if we'd had a true plan to bring complete streets, to move our streets into the 21st century, where we could have done that here, and we didn't. And so we've lost that opportunity to some degree, but it is not too late. And I think the beginning of a mayoral administration is exactly the right time to do it. Part of this is having that vision. Part of it, though, too, John, you and I have had this conversation. It's having a mayor who actually understands how to sort of roll up your sleeves and get into the nitty gritty of what makes it take so long, why it's so expensive to get big changes made, and really being willing to commit to fixing the interagency processes around capital construction and cost that are holding us back. And those are, particularly as budget director, I oversaw not just the budget, but all the management across the federal government. And these are the kinds of issues that I really took on, particularly around climate change, that I think we fundamentally need a mayor to take on and really fix in the city as well.
So city government is a place where the mayor can pretty much order those things to happen, which is one of its strengths if you have that leadership. Bringing everybody else in the city along is a whole other job. So what, how do you frame that for the public? And then how do you see the process of going gangbusters with, the bus rapid transit and the open streets and the space for pedestrians, as well as the bike network, especially if we're physically building more of it? How do you get out of the sort of block by block trench warfare we've come to experience so much in this administration?
Well, John, I think part of it, and this is something I really lead with in my transportation plans, which are at shaunfornyc.com, by the way. Please go there. We are building the campaign of ideas and I think have the broadest, most comprehensive vision on this issue, but also on so many others. Part of it is you have to lead with equity. And I think one of the challenges has been that we have not, whether it's City Bike or many other parts of our infrastructure in the city, we haven't focused on ensuring this is something that benefits everyone and everywhere in the city. And while the solutions will look different in different places, given density, it is something where we need to start building a broader coalition of support, because I think if we can do that, then we're not going to have quite the same fights of, the balkanization around these issues. Look, I think part of it too is, as you know, not just with e-bikes, but also with scooters and other micro-mobility modes that are coming at greater speeds. We really need to solve these issues about how to truly separate out lanes so that New Yorkers will feel safer, both in those modes themselves, but also as pedestrians. And I think that's going to be a fundamental divide that we have to solve. And that really begins with the right regulation and introducing these new technologies in a way, including e-bikes, in a way that really do ensure that we build a broad coalition and not drive greater divisiveness around it.
I mean, given that you still may have some community boards who just say, no thanks. What do you do then?
Right, but I think, look, again, this goes back to my point about bus rapid transit. If we're introducing this with a comprehensive set of options, where, say, you're going to get a bus system that gets you, instead of an hour or an hour and 15 minutes, but 20 minutes or 30 minutes to job centers, if we truly are aligning the signaling with the buses, there's so many things that we could do. And in those transformations are also adding bike lanes and other options. We're bringing City Bike. I think you start to change that conversation, not just with what you're taking away in terms of cars, but what you're adding in terms of options. And that, I think, can start to change the conversation in many communities as well.
You specifically talked about integrating transit and bikes as a mobility measure, as a sustainability measure. What's your thinking there?
Well, I think one of the key issues is not just having City Bike infrastructure. It's about bike parking as well. And that's going to be a critical piece of the solution. And we need to do it on both ends, right? You need it both in our commercial and residential zoning to be something that we're giving incentives for and that we're ensuring is part of anything that we're building or renovating at a significant level. But it's also at the transit hubs, so that we're creating an interconnectedness that's really, this was part of what we saw as one of the really critical issues in our partnership for sustainable communities. I have many bike shirts from mayors across the country from introducing interconnected systems. Salt Lake City, as you know, is one of the leaders on intermodal transportation options. And I cut the ribbon on a huge new bike parking area at the downtown transit hub. Those are the kinds of things we need to be doing more aggressively. And it's something that I think my Office of the Public Realm can really help drive. There's the private side of it with, as I said, commercial and residential, but with the Office of Public Realm incorporating, true protected bike parking in ways that folks could, have a kind of a real last mile solution on a bike in many, many places across the city.
And we have a bike parking company here in Brooklyn called Unipod, who's having a really hard time getting city government out of its way to do things that we've said we've wanted for years and years. I mean, it seems like if we have a climate imperative and we have these mobility needs, would you help those guys sort of get out the door? And they're doing better in Jersey City than they're doing in New York right now.
Absolutely. And look, this is not an issue that is specific to just cycling or bike parking.
Right.
It is something that we're seeing more and more around the city. I was meeting with small business owners in Jackson Heights in Queens the other day, and just getting a sign approved. And so really having a mayor who understands the nuts and bolts of how governing works, how you can create interagency partnerships. We ought to have a single website where any company, whether it's on bike parking or otherwise, can go for all the permits that they need, and really streamlining, especially in a moment where so many small businesses are at the point of extinction in this city. We really need an approach that streamlines and simplifies what it means to do business with the city, including in this, in the specific examples we're talking about here.
Right. So it's interesting you mentioned, talking with those merchants who are trying to get something, get the city to act. And I don't know if it came up, but are you able to make a good business case for the kind of streets you think we need? And it's partly recovery, but it's also how do we thrive in the next decade? What is that business case?
Well, I think the big picture business case is that in the modern economy, talent decides where to live and companies and capital follow. And if you believe that, as I do, the single most important tool any mayor has for economic development is quality of life. And I learned this in my work, not just in New York, but across the country, that transportation options and transportation affordability is one of the primary drivers of the choices more and more people are making about where to live. First of all, it's that housing and transportation costs combined make up over 50% of the average American family's budget. And so being able to move more affordably, to live without owning a car, to ride public transportation more effectively, including if that means starting on a city bike and ending on the subway. All of that is absolutely critical, but it's more than that too. I raised two boys who are big bikers in the city. We used to get out all the time and, get in those protected bike lanes, worried about our young toddlers. Were they going to be okay in the unprotected lanes, getting up to Prospect Park or getting to the waterfront? Those are all things that are fundamental to the choices that people make about where to live. And as I said, in this modern economy, it used to be that our cities developed on harbors or on, where iron ore was, or transportation routes. More and more, talent decides where they want to live and companies and capital follow. And transportation options are a critical part of driving economic development in this modern economy.
Let me just pose two of these other sort of, weirdly non-governed things in New York that, would just be great to get some commentary on. One is, we talked a little bit about more physical infrastructure, and we do some things pretty well in New York. One of them was when we really rebuilt the West Side Highway back around 2000. We put in, the busiest bike lane in the United States there at the time, and we used federal highway money to do it. It was amazing and great, but we haven't really followed up with more of that, except in some small chunks here and there. And partly it's because some of those chunks are EDC chunks, some of them are Parks Department chunks, some of them are DOT chunks, who then has DDC build their chunks, and that takes even longer, and the designs get diluted. How do you make a system out of that in the Donovan administration? And maybe it's your point about we can make them dance with a budget power.
Well, first of all, I ride that bike lane a lot, and yes, it's pretty great. It's also way too small for the demand, and
yet it is the widest in the city.
Yeah.
Because everyone goes there because it's the only one.
Yeah, I think it points up that we need much more of, what I would call real, bike highways, thoroughfares where you can really draw a significant amount of traffic, speed up, and really make it more of an effective commute. But here's what I would say. Don't just take my word for it. Look at my record on these kinds of things. And I talked about the Sustainable Communities Partnership that I built that really cut across agencies, ensured that we were giving planning grants that cut across agencies and that brought capital from multiple different agencies together. But I would also point to an effort that I led after Hurricane Sandy called Rebuild by Design, which was a worldwide design competition. We put $1 billion of capital into those designs. And what it began with, John, was real community-based planning, right? It was not the government coming in and saying, here's what you're going to get. It was starting with communities saying, what is it that you envision for this space? And in large part, it was our waterfronts that we were reimagining after Sandy. And what it meant was multi-purpose infrastructure that really drove integrated planning. And we created a really integrated system of agency collaborations through that fundamentally changed the way those agencies planned and worked together. And that's what we need is a mayor who really drives from City Hall through an office of public realm that brings everyone to the table and really demands accountability to that process. It's very hard to do that if you're doing it at the agency level alone. You need real leadership that it has real accountability for every agency, and then you relentlessly manage it. We set up something called HUDStat that really made sure we were looking at the metrics, were we delivering on time, and holding people accountable to that, not just to the vision, but to the actual results. That's why we made so much progress on homelessness, and it's why the Partnership for Sustainable Communities, I think, really made such a fundamental difference. And if it's any indication, the fact that the Tea Party singled it out as something they were going to attack because it was actually starting to make change in the way we were building our cities across the country was a pretty foul. I took it as a compliment anyway.
Yeah, no, I would. The other one I wanted to mention is, if you go to, truly bike-friendly places, you can tell that even the car drivers have been trained as bicyclists at some point. So we've actually at Bike New York been able to set up a small program in middle schools where kids are now getting on-bike education, but it's another one of these Frankenstein monsters where DOT is paying for it using some odd funding source, but education department is implementing it in places where they can find willing principals. And we just like to figure out, once the system is back on its feet, the school system, let's make it a little more mainstream and a little less wonky and weird, and just sort of drive that a bit. And, the chancellor, the former chancellor loved it. He was getting good press from it, but it's still, we have hundreds of schools and, we need to scale.
Part of this, I think, we have so many examples of really interesting things that are happening at the local level. I often like to say there's nothing wrong with New York that can't be solved by what's right with New York. You're going to find a really interesting solution somewhere in New York. Part of this is the coordination we've been talking about. Part of it is a government that's truly innovative. And, innovation is often borrowing, or even maybe to be a little more direct, theft from other places in terms of what's working well. And so one of the things that I've always tried to do in my leadership is to ensure that you're creating an actual office that's looking at innovation and is responsible for looking across the city, even looking across the country at what the most innovative models are, and then being able to scale those up. It's something that, frankly, I think separates me from any of the other candidates. I'm really the only one who's worked across the country and even across the globe with the best mayors and seen the other kind of models that we can bring to New York. The old saying, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. Well, if they can make it there, we can make it here, only better, I believe. And so we ought to be adapting models from across the city, but also more broadly.
No, it drives me insane because we started this practice of protected bike lanes in New York back in 2007, everyone came to look at what we were doing. And I run into brilliant people in the city every week. And, but they're consultants and agency people and, elected officials, and they're only as good as their chief client. And we're just not doing that anymore. So thank you so much for talking with us and laying out how you would approach that kind of stuff, the innovation, the brutal management that we need to impose some order on things. And we will see you out on the street. We will see you further on the campaign here on our screens, and hopefully someday we'll get together.
I look forward to it. In the saddle, hopefully.
Yes, absolutely.
Miguel, love up to you and everybody.
Okay, thanks. Shaun Donovan, candidate for mayor, former Obama budget secretary. Thank you again.